God the husband from the wife's perspective. All throughout the Bible, we see the son's perspective of the father. The son speaks about his father's love and power. He talks about his greatness and abilities. But the son can only speak from a son's perspective. If you have a family of your own, imagine them writing a book about their life and experiences with you as their father. Your kids would simply tell us what their life was like being your child. Let's say you're married with 2 kids. A daughter and a son. Both of your kids would be able to speak about their father. Each child would be able to give a detailed account of their life as your child. Your son would speak about his experiences from a son's perspective. Your daughter would give a detailed account of her life as your child from a daughter's perspective. Being that they're different genders, their experiences wouldn't be the same. Let's not confuse experience with love. As a father, you should love your kids equally. But your daughter may not share equal experience with your son. So it's important to get both of their perspective. In fact, it helps the reader understand who you truly were as a father. How would people understand your capabilities as a father? How would people be able to tell what type of father you are? Through your children. Their account of you paints the picture of what type of father you are. But how would anyone know how good of a husband you are without your wife's account of it? We need the wife's perspective. Israel can't tell us anything about being a wife, because Israel is a city. How would a city be able to tell me how to behave as a woman and a wife? It can't. It's truly insulting to insinuate that God is married to a city. What could that city possibly do to please my God? How can that city teach me how to be a wife? How could a city give me a detailed perspective of what it's like being the wife of God? It can't, because that city isn't God's wife. We need the wife's perspective to understand who God truly is as a husband. A city can't tell me that. A city is not a woman. At this point, it seems like people are blatantly lying for no reason. If you want to understand who God is as a husband, ask his wife. Who existed with him before Israel was even thought of. Wisdom is God's wife. She has a far greater reach. She's not a city, she's a spirit. Almost every single lower god has a wife. Except a few religions that hate feminine energy. God having a wife isn't demonic, but him not having one is. If you believe in a God that doesn't have a female counterpart, then you shouldn't have one either. If you believe in a God that married a city, you should be doing the same. What's taking place is people are picking sides, people are picking gods. Choose wisely, because in the end you will fight for the God you believe in. This is a war of gods. If your God doesn't have a female counterpart, consider it a disadvantage, because almost every other God does. They know how important it is to have that on your side with any battle. You need a queen. I often talk about the American God show. In one episode, the god Odin clearly stated every god needs a queen. If your God doesn't have one, consider it a lost. I don't consider myself a part of any group that limits God's power. I allow people to believe in whatever they wish, and whatever God they choose. Some Christians believe their God having a wife, or even saying their God has a wife, is demonic. In reality, him having a wife makes this statement true. We are created in God's image. God's wife is important, him having one isn't wrong. We have to truly sit back and ask ourselves. If we are truly made in God's image, people would be walking around engaged to cities and groups of people. I think many people refuse to admit, God is a lover, he's committed to one person. God is romantic, he's love personified. You think he's just in existence by himself? He's not, he's never been alone. Wisdom proves she has been around with him. No matter what you say, she was there. That's why she rises, that's why her perspective is important. Wisdom isn't a word, she's a living energy, she's spirit, she's God's spirit. Wisdom is the highest, there isn't any other spirit in the Bible proclaiming their existence like she is. If you ask yourself why is she so important? Why do we truly need her perspective? Think about the things she's seen, she literally was present for everything. She knows the time frames, she knows why God even created certain things. Her perspective of God gives us detailed accounts of what she experienced. Imagine how she feels knowing she has all this knowledge and insight and people won't even listen. Think about how God's wife feels. If you're a married woman, think about how you would feel. Put yourself in God's wife's shoes. Being told you're not important when you are. It's not right, and it's disrespectful. I would never treat my God and his family in that way. I would never treat anyone's wife that way. As women, we could all learn from this. We can highlight the feminine presence that dwells with God. I also want to say this. When wisdom existed beside God, she never considered herself his equal, she was his inspiration. She is the original helper, her spirit alone inspired God. She doesn't claim to be God himself, she claims to be a source of inspiration for God. That's the first lesson we should take from her, Mother Wisdom. As a wife, you should be your husband's inspiration. You should inspire him to be a better man, to be a loving man. You alone are his inspiration. But you have to be just that, you have to inspire him. You do that by understanding who you are, as a woman. Wisdom gives us a voice. But wisdom isn't loud or boastful. So you truly have to seek that voice. She's the pearl of a great price. Once you find her, you give up everything. God's wife leads you right back to God, not to herself. But once you learn her perspective, the wife's perspective, you understand the husband's. They're a team, without her perspective we are lost. Not only her, we have to include the son's perspective. He gives us the idea of the father. The son gives us a perspective of being a son, and having a father. The wife's perspective is from being a wife and a mother. Wisdom is God's inspiration, God's spirit is called wisdom. That's what inspires him, wisdom gives him inspiration. If it wasn't for her, God wouldn't have been so inspired to create limitless things. As a husband, God literally lived to please his wife, that's why so many things have came into existence. She was there, she always was, and she always will be.